Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Kfir is a 9-month-old baby. He has red hair and an adorable laughter and smile. He is a younger brother to Ariel, a 4-year-old child. They are the children of Shiri and Yarden Bibas. On October 7th at 6:30 a.m., their morning became a nightmare of a whole nation. Hamas bestial terrorists, followed also, and this is critical for the world to know, by so-called ordinary inhabitants of Gaza, infiltrated their kibbutz, went house by house, murdered, tortured, raped, burned in one pile, innocent babies who were beheaded, children, women, men, the elderly, and among them also Holocaust survivors. The terrorists, together with Gazan mob, reached also Kfir and Ariel's house. After hours of staying in the security room of their house, after hours the family stayed in this security room, the terrorists managed to break their door, enter the house, and abduct Kfir, the youngest of all babies who were abducted to Gaza, together with his brother Ariel, their mother Shiri, together with her husband Yarden, and the grandparents. 6 members of the same family who are now in Gaza, and we, as of this moment, don't know if they are even alive or dead, together with 260 other Israeli hostages, of course. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the 18th day of the war. Israeli authorities are reporting so far 1,400 Israeli killed and over 5,130 wounded in Israeli hospitals. As of this moment, there are 222 Israeli hostages officially reported as being held by Hamas in Gaza. 222. Among them, 30 children under the age of 18. Kfir and Ariel are among them. This number of hostages is expected to rise even higher, as there are still over 100 missing Israelis. More than 2 weeks into the war, as Israel continues to reel from the horrors of the Saturday of the October 7th, the IDF is reportedly completing preparations to attack Hamas from the ground. And we at INSS are here to provide answers and keep the information flowing as truthful, reliable, and fact-based. With me in the Zoom today is Colonel Reserve Advocate Pnina Sharvit Baruch, Senior Researcher and Head of the Program of Law and National Security at the INSS. Together with Pnina, I will discuss the issue of laws and armed conflict with regards to the war, as this seems to be an ever-growing problem, complicated problem here in our region and also in the media. Hi, Pnina. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Hi, Adi.
I will start maybe with the most burning questions. You know, Israel right now in the media and also in the social media is being blamed for crimes of war. What can we say about this now?
Well, I think these allegations against Israel, these accusations against Israel are derived either, some of them, of course, it's part of the campaign that the Hamas and its supporters are fighting in the international arena. So it's of course a purposeful campaign, and some of it is maybe a understanding of the law and of the situation. So let me start by saying Israel, unlike the Hamas that carried out what you described, it's war crimes, it's crimes against humanity, it's even genocide. So the Hamas definitely is not respecting any kind of law or moral rule. Israel is a law-abiding state. Israel, it is important for us to remain different. We are not like them, and to work and to operate within the bounds of the law. But what needs to be understood is when we are applying the laws of armed conflict, we have to apply the principles to the situation. And here I think there's a bit of misunderstanding. The one allegation that is made or accusation is that Israel is targeting civilians and civilian objects. And this is a misunderstanding of the situation. Israel is not targeting civilians. What it is targeting civilian buildings. But these civilian buildings, and here it's important to understand, are lawful military objectives. Why so? Because according to the laws of war, or IHL, International Humanitarian Law, if a civilian object is used for the military purposes of the enemy, it loses its civilian nature and it becomes a lawful military target. Now, what we need to understand is that the Hamas, all of the Hamas military capabilities and also of the other terrorist organizations like the Islamic Jihad, they are all within civilian structures and underneath civilian structures. They use only civilian infrastructure for all their activity, for storing weapons, for command and control, for firing rockets, for planning their actions against Israel. And that makes these objects lawful targets. So we're not attacking unlawful targets. That's the one point that needs to be understood.
Out that this is under international law. It's lawful to attack these buildings.
It's completely lawful. What isn't lawful is what the Hamas is doing by using civilians as shield and operating from within the civilians. That's another war crime. But what Israel is doing, that is, according to the principle of distinction, completely lawful. The second point, the second principle or rule of law is that you need to, it's called take feasible precautions to minimize harm to civilians. Now, Israel is doing that. It's giving warning as much as possible. Now, the critical word is feasible. There's a difference between an operation when you have time and you can measure and you can give individual warnings that the law doesn't require anywhere individual warnings, but it could be a feasible precaution and to use very accurate weapons. When we are facing such a war, and we are facing, and I'll come to this in a minute, such a huge threat to our existence, then the feasible precautions are in accordance to the situation. So we are trying, we are warning civilians, we are asking them to leave. The Hamas is preventing them from leaving, again, using them as shields. But that's what we can do to minimize harm. Now, despite this, harm is happening to civilians in Gaza. Now, here's the third and most important principle, is the principle of most relevant one, the principle of proportionality. Because even when you attack a lawful target, as we are doing, you have to balance between the collateral damage anticipated to civilians and see if it is not excessive in relation to the military advantage expected from the attack. That's the law. So it means you have to do the balancing. The military advantage, by the way, gets the upper hand, because only if the collateral damage is excessive, then it would be an unlawful attack. And here what is critical to understand, yes, many civilians are killed and injured at the moment in the Gaza Strip. This is very sad and unfortunate. It is not in Israel's interest also. We don't want, and the more civilian casualties, it's beyond the legal and moral issue. It's also against our interest. It puts pressure on Israel. So it's definitely not our purpose. It is the purpose of the Palestinians, of the Hamas, who's using these Palestinians. But what we have to understand is that when we do this estimate, the military advantage side of it is nothing like before. This is not another operation that we've had a few, the Hamas are firing rockets, which is very, of course, problematic, and it disrupts our lives. But we have
And what is it
shelters.
Different this time, Pnina?
The difference,
what makes it different this time?
There are two main differences that make this threat a huge, even existential threat on Israel. The first is that Hamas itself has revealed itself to be an enemy that is much stronger and more sophisticated than we thought. The Hamas managed to enter into Israel thousands of operatives and to actually conquer and hold for quite a while, a few hours, in some places a few days, parts of the state of Israel.
Yes, and we know that, by the way, the initial plan was to reach even a lot more north.
A lot more, but they managed quite a lot. It's also important to see that the plan of the Hamas was to get to civilians, to torture them. You spoke about the kidnapped children, but there are evidence of torture, that they tied up children in front of their parents and they chopped off their fingers, they took out their eyes, and only then killed them. So this was plans. We found evidence that this was pre-planned. This kind of torture and brutality. They did that in order to terrorize us, but they showed their power against us. Today there are 200,000 internally displaced Israelis that cannot go back to their homes near the Gaza Strip. Everything is burnt. We have the Northern Front. I'll speak about that in a minute. Which means that the Hamas is a huge threat on Israel. We cannot continue to live next to this threat. The Hamas, we thought, we had a misconception that the Hamas cares about the Palestinian people, and that if we give, Israel was giving more and more work permits for Gazans, allowing more and more cooperation, trying to make a joint, by the way, those murdered in some of the kibbutzim was those at the forefront of trying to have joint ventures with the Palestinians in Gaza, joint businesses, were supplying them with water and sewage programs. This was the peace camp. There were people that were driving the Palestinian residents of Gaza to hospitals in Israel. These are the ones that were barbarically murdered and kidnapped. So Israel thought that the Hamas is becoming more pragmatic. This was a big, big mistake. Under all this guise of being somehow more pragmatic, they were planning this because they have only one aim, and today it is very clear what it is: the destruction of the state of Israel. The destruction of the state of Israel and the murdering of all Israelis, including Arabs, by the way. They also killed Bedouins and a young child and a woman. Now, when we understand this rationale, and they care nothing.
By the way, it was very, very clear pointed in their you know, when people read about Hamas, in the ideology of Hamas, this was repeatedly said for years. Yeah. It was said, it was, okay, about the misconceptions, we didn't want to believe it.
We didn't want to believe it. You want to believe that there's someone there that you can make peace. I'm in the peace camp. I'm talking to Palestinians, trying to find a way out. We want to believe that it's possible. The Hamas made it blatantly clear that from its point of view, there's only one thing. It's the destruction of the state of Israel. They knew that we will respond in a way that will also harm civilian lives in the Gaza Strip. They don't care about the civilians in the Gaza Strip. That's the last thing they care about. And they're also very popular. Their popularity has risen. Okay, so the Palestinians also are supporting the Hamas. But that's not a reason, of course. We're not going after people because they support the Hamas. We don't want to kill civilians, but we do understand that we cannot live with the Hamas threat on our borders. So that means that we have to eliminate the military capabilities of the Hamas. And as I explained before, everything is within civilian objects, where civilians live. To do that, there's no chance, but unfortunately, when we attack these targets, and you have to attack all the system, part after part, dismantle it completely. To do that, yes, you have to carry out these attacks. We're seeing the devastation in Gaza Strip, a lot of destruction. That's the only way to get to this military infrastructure, and civilians also get harmed because the military advantage is so huge. This harm, in my view, is not excessive as the law requires. Maybe it's extensive, but it's not excessive. And that means that it is proportionate because this is the balance we have to do. And here I'll add another issue, because that's one of the threats. And I was talking about an existential threat. So Hamas is an existential threat to the south of Israel, that's for sure. But there's another issue. The Hamas has allies. It's been supported by Iran. It's working in cohort with Hezbollah. Iran is also now using its other Shia militias around the world. From Yemen, we already had missiles fired at us. They're waiting for just the word from Iraq, from Syria. Hezbollah is just waiting to see what we'll do. If Israel is conceived as weak, and if Israel is conceived as not be able to, that it doesn't have the ability to confront the Hamas, all these enemies are going to come in, and this could, and I don't want to sound alarmist, and I believe in our strengths, and we have the US as allies, but it is an existential threat. We have to understand that. And when this is the level of the threat, and this is also part of the military consideration, the military advantage of dismantling the Hamas capabilities, again, this impacts how the proportionality analysis is applied. And I'm asking anybody who's listening or seeing our interviews, think if it was your country, it was your people. What would you expect your government to do? Would you expect your government to refrain from actions and leave such an enemy and leave and be perceived as weak and bring in also other enemies because it's to spare the civilians' lives of the other side? I don't think any government of any country would do that, and rightfully so, and the law doesn't require us to commit suicide.
And just to add to all the very important things that you just stated, Israel also provides humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip. As we speak right now, trucks loaded with food, with medication, with water, are entering the Gaza Strip. But of course, they're being checked by Israeli hands, and this is very, very important because we've seen the latest attempts to also smuggle ammunition in these kind of trucks. So Israel is providing this humanitarian aid, and yet, Pnina, we see in the media, in the international media, social media, a lot of anti-Israel hatred, a lot of anti-Semitism, supporting Hamas. And you wanted to, I would just, I want to let you talk about this linkage between supporting Hamas and anti-Semitism. Why is supporting Hamas today is considered anti-Semitism? Clear, pure anti-Semitism.
I think, so first of all, just to add, yes, we are also allowing, we don't want a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. We are not against the Palestinians of Gaza. It's Hamas that is against them. He's their enemy. It's their enemy. I think anybody that continues to chant Free Palestine and anybody supporting Hamas has to understand what Free Palestine means. If they didn't understand it until now, let me explain it in clear words. Free Palestine equals destroy Israel. So when people are chanting Free Palestine and when people are cheering and supporting Hamas, what they are saying is we support the destruction of Israel. We support the murder of all Israelis barbarically and as cruelly as possible also. Yeah. So if that's what you believe in, go on to these protests, but at least don't lie to yourself and think that you're doing that in the name of some ending the occupation. I am for a peaceful resolution of the conflict. I've been working for years to try to reach a peaceful resolution of the conflict. This is not about the ending the occupation. This is not about the legitimate rights of the Palestinians for self-determination. This is about the destruction of Israel. And people should understand when they back the Hamas, when they back these when they go and talk about Free Palestine, they are talking about the destruction of Israel. If that's what they believe in, okay, I think that's antisemitism. If they don't believe in that, maybe they should rethink their support to the Hamas and to the Palestinians fighting in the name of the Hamas or adopting the Hamas tactics. The Hamas tactics are ISIS tactics. When you support the Hamas, you're supporting elements like ISIS, you're supporting for us as Jews, Nazi ideas of destroying not only the state of Israel, of destroying the Jewish people. And that's how we see that anti-Semites all around the world see now this as an opportunity to get rid of the Jews, to end what Hitler didn't.
What, by the way, is your opinion regarding what is happening right now in elite universities in the United States, but also in Europe, in elite universities, in places where we would never think that heads of universities would not react after what the world has seen in the past 2 weeks. They have not reacted. They have not banned the Hamas for their vicious, barbaric crimes. How do you explain this? We're not talking about people from the street. We're talking about heads of elite universities that have not yet spoken out against the Hamas, against the supporters of Hamas who are located inside those universities. In Berkeley, for example, elite university. We've all heard about the Israeli professor that trying to reach out to whoever he could in campus, saying that he is personally afraid of sending his children or sending other Jewish children, people who study there, to a university that does not ban Hamas for these crimes. How can Israel?
And even though this is threatening the lives of their Jewish students, they're not doing it. So that they can have blood on their hands eventually if they continue with this line. I think some of them are really anti-Semites. Okay, and some of them are so many years in love with this idea that the poor Palestinians are so oppressed by this cruel Israel, and all they want is, a state of their own in some of the territories, and Israel is brutally preventing that. That I think they don't want to open their eyes and understand this is not about that. I'm not saying there are maybe still Palestinians out there that are willing and want to make a compromise and to live side by side Israel. I believe they are still there. They are afraid to open their mouths. We don't hear Palestinians talking about against what the Hamas did. Although I'm sure some of them are also appalled and afraid because the Hamas will come after them too, after anybody who doesn't adopt. We saw ISIS going after Muslims. But I think these people are so caught up in their hatred to Israel that they find it as that it's okay if Israel is bad occupier. So it's okay to go into a local village and behead babies. That's okay in the name of these liberal ideas of human rights. I spoke yesterday, I was in a panel and there was someone from Human Rights Watch, and she was continuing to talk all the time about Hamas fighters and not even ready to term it as terrorism. If you don't look into evil in its eyes and say that's evil, then maybe you are on the side of evil. I think that's what people have to understand.
For sure. And I want to stress out the fact that on October 7th, not only Hamas terrorists entered Israel and murdered babies and women and men, it was also ordinary Palestinians living in Gaza who went right after there was an open it was possible for them to enter, and did these crimes. They committed these crimes. They did it together with the terrorists. It was some kind of a cooperation between terrorists and residents of Gaza, ordinary residents of Gaza. And this is something that is very, very important to stress out. It was a collaboration of two of those groups.
Yeah, I think we've had a process of so many years of dehumanization of Israelis and Jews, of teaching children in Palestinian schools, mainly in Gaza, but not only, in UNRWA-led schools, by the way, teaching them from the age from when they start the kindergarten, that the Jews are monsters, that the Jews are not human, that the Jews are the evil, and that makes it okay to kill them and to murder them and to torture them. This indoctrination, we are seeing its fruit now. And when Israel tried time after time to say, you're giving money to the education system, see to it that it doesn't have these kinds of messages in such kind of incitement in the education system. We said, you're interfering in and you're trying to block assistance to the Palestinians. UNRWA itself, by all the time allowing and even encouraging this idea of the refugees that will come one day to their houses that these Jewish monsters are living in. All this from when you start from age, from 1-year-olds to teach them this indoctrination, we are seeing this now. And the day after, if we don't deal with the hatred that is there entrenched in the system, it will happen again. We will never have peace. There are also some extreme voices in Israel, and sometimes they make the comparison. It's nothing like it. First of all, it's a very small fringe, and all the Israeli society opposes anybody who talks about murdering Palestinian children. This is not only not the norm, it's outside the norm even for the right parties that are on the right. That's the norm. That's what they are teaching their children. And this hatred, we saw it. We saw what that means in the brutality of the 7th of October.
Yes, this is it. I myself find it very hard to find the words after this podcast, which is very important, but also to talk about this. We started with the hostages, and I would like also to finish this discussion with the hostages, this impossible problem in which Israel is now on the one hand, sending humanitarian aid to Gaza to help the men, women, and children there who are not connected with Hamas. But this humanitarian aid does not reach the hostages. 222 Israeli hostages, they don't get any humanitarian aid. This impossible conflict in which Israel is right now. Maybe we will end with this. What do you have to say about this?
I think that anybody who's watching and does think that what happened to us is terrible, and does think, what could I do to help? You can help. The Hamas is concerned by the international image that has been created of making the equivalence to ISIS, for example. The children hostages, all these pictures when they appear, it does matter to Hamas. So everybody who will put pressure anywhere in the media, in the internet, on this issue, especially people that are not necessarily Israeli supporters, but are human beings, if they put a lot of pressure everywhere in the media, in the academia, in the government on this issue of the hostages, free the hostages, this kind of pressure could help free them. So you can help us here if you want.
Please do, please do. Thank you very much, Pnina Sharvit Baruch, for your for sharing with us your views, also on the legal perspective, which is so important right now in this war, in what happened till now, and also in what is expected later on. Thank you very much, and thank you for our audience. We will keep informing you and give you the best information we have with the best experts that we have on issues relating to this war. Thank you very much, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.